Now it's time for TIPisodes with quick tips you should know. Techniques you can implement into your workflow right here on A Tale, oh yeah, A Tale of Two Hygienists.
Welcome back, everyone, to this week's TIPisode. I'm your host, Andrew Johnston, and thank you so much for joining me on this beautiful Friday, or whenever actually you're listening to this episode. This week, I wanted to tackle the idea of calling patients. It's not maybe controversial, that's not the right word, but I think most hygienists would be like, dude, that's not my job. I'm not going to be able to do this. But then other hygienists are like, yes, let me add it. And I do want to preface this TIPisode by saying each office does run a little bit differently. And in the most perfect of worlds, I don't think hygienists should be making phone calls, especially not to help fill their schedule. Ideally, there's a protocol in place. There's a template in place for what a schedule should look like. And there are personnel in the front, the back, whoever, it doesn't really matter. There's personnel that are going to follow that protocol. Unfortunately, this is becoming more and more rare in the offices. There's a lack of protocol in most offices. And then when there is protocol, there is a lack of competent staff. And that kind of seems to be more of the norm. So as I go through this today, just kind of keep that also in your head. Additionally, we have two types of compensation styles that are kind of becoming the norm. One is hourly and one is production-based compensation. Both have their pros and cons. I think there's an episode that we can have about that some other time. And I also think that there are certain personality types that tend to gravitate towards one style or the other. So before you keep listening to this, because you might have to turn this off if this isn't going to be for you, if you are someone who will only accept hourly pay, you are completely closed-minded to anything else, maybe you don't really care what your schedule looks like, you just whatever someone puts on your schedule, you're just going to do it and you're good with it. Maybe you like being kind of, maybe hidden in the background. A lot of these thoughts likely are going to resonate with you. But if you're someone who's a little bit more type A, which I think surprisingly most hygienists are type A, and again, this is probably a different conversation, but type A, but also a little bit introverted, which is both kind of weird. Maybe you're someone who wants to have control of the schedule that you see. Maybe you are on a production-based compensation and maybe not willing to let someone else dictate your income. Or maybe you're looking for a way that you can better serve the public. And if any of that part resonates with you, you got to keep listening to this TIPisode. So first things first, let's talk about controlling the types of patients that you see. I mentioned this on the TIPisode, I think it was last week or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, about the standard of care. But if you believe in the science and the evidence, and you know that there's 50% of your patients that they should be in perio protocol, whether that's for initial therapy or maintenance, that kind of doesn't really matter. But then in your 8 patients a day, you're seeing 6 or 7 prophies. Something is really, really wrong. And I think sometimes the disconnect is that the front office is sometimes incentivized, or maybe they're just told, hey, this is what you're going to do so you can keep a job, that you have to fill the schedules. And they're going to fill it with anything. That they're going to fill up with the first yes that they get is what they're going to use to fill it up with. And while a day of prophies sounds really nice, well, guess what? If you're really doing it right, the corresponding day of SRPs all day does not sound that great. So with your participation in calling patients, you can target the types of patients that complement the schedule that's already built. So if there's only one hole or maybe there's a couple of holes throughout that week, you can complement it with the types of patients that you want to see. You can do the one SRP in the morning, one in the afternoon, not have to put your body through that rigmarole doing them back to back to back. And for you younger listeners who are like, yeah, that's not really a big deal. I can do 3 SRPs back to back to back. First of all, you're probably not wrong. You can. I think we all started that way. But long term, you are asking for some serious body aches and pains. It is our responsibility to assess our patients properly, convey those findings and recommendations to the doctors appropriately. And if we're seeing the national average of disease, then we need to have a balance to our schedules accordingly. That's just what it is. The next point, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the production model because I think that this only is for a specific number of you all listening, and it's not probably a very high number. But the underlying thought here is if you are on a production model, why would you leave it up to someone else to help build a productive schedule? As I just said, if you're doing the right thing anyway with the proper diagnosis and the proper treatment plan, You'll have plenty of production coming from your chair. You're going to make a ton of good money. But why chance it by leaving it in someone else's hands? And well, I said I wasn't going to spend a lot of time on the production part because I know most of you really hate this part of the conversation, but I will just say one more quick thing about it. I was talking with someone today about it. In all my years, I have never had a hygienist make less than whatever the local competitive hourly wage is when they did literally the bare minimum of the standard of care. Not the bare minimum where we do prophies all day long, but like the bare minimum of the standard of care, which includes accurate periodiagnosis and treatment, fluoride sealants if they need them, and then the take-home products if they're moderate or high caries risk, or if they're periodontally involved. Just the take-home products for those specific conditions. And that's not even adding things like PeriProtect trays or oral cancer screenings, et cetera, et cetera. Conversely, though, I've also had hygienists make way more than their doctors in that same office by being evidence-based clinicians and doing the right thing as the disease presents. And we can talk about all this stuff on a later episode. If anyone's curious about it, just let me know. But if you just do the right things, that's the nature of the beast. We're going to make money. But of course, we don't do things just for making money. We do it because it's the right thing to do. Anyways, so finally, I will also want to talk about being the patient advocate. Our patients love us. They trust us. They turn to us to tell them the truth of things. How often, we talk about this all the time on the show, how often does the doctor leave and then the patient turns to us and says, hey, is that true? Or do I really need that crown? Or do I really need these fillings? Or do I really need ClinPro 5000 or whatever, right? I think that sometimes when a patient doesn't come back, I think they're just scared. I think sometimes they also forget. Can you imagine the comfort that they might feel, though, when they hear it's your voice, your familiar voice on the other end of that phone? I think that they need you to help them help themselves. And so there's this list that does exist. It's a list of patients who have accepted the treatment plan, but who have not scheduled yet. And if I was someone that was going to be calling patients, that's kind of where I would start. And as you're going through this list, maybe look for specific names, if you can remember them, of patients who are a little bit more apprehensive, and start with those patients. It's going to take a little bit more time on the phone, but if you spend your time resolving concerns, then you're going to help someone who had no plan, no intention of getting healthier. You're going to help them get healthier. And I think that's really beautiful. We know they need the treatment. But sometimes I think that they let other voices or opinions or thoughts into their head, and they listen to those ones saying, hey, you can put this off a little bit longer, or, you don't really actually need that treatment. And we need to be the voice of reason that's a little bit louder than those other thoughts or voices as a healthcare provider, by being that objective provider for them. I think that many of us think about serving in low-income places with access to care issues. We want to do good. Maybe we want to go on a dental mission trip. All of those are absolutely worthy causes, but sometimes we also can't get to all of those things. But we have patients in our own practices that equally need our attention. And if you can't get to those other things, this is maybe where you can really serve the public. It's hard. It's uncomfortable getting used to a new skill. It's not a skill that we were taught in hygiene school or pretty much almost anywhere else. Being on the phone is weird and awkward for a lot of us. But for whatever your reasons, the hygienists that I know who work the phone and the patient lists, they are so much more happy in the long run. They get whatever it is that they're looking for, whether it's control, whether it's the production, or they just want to elevate patient care. They want to get to that patient that wasn't going to come back in, and that's going to make them feel good. That's going to fill their cup. They're so much happier doing it this way. So I guess big picture, long term, keep your mind open. If you're a little bit opposed to it, just keep it open for just a little bit. Think about it, weigh the pros and cons, see if that might be for you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and all of our episodes. I hope you all enjoy your weekend. If you have any thoughts or questions, please email me, andrew@atale2hygienist.com. We'll talk to you soon.
A tale of two hygienists.